Hi, I'm Nairy from Bossing, and welcome to the Phosani Nightmare Fight Guide. In this video, I'll be showing you the solo-only hard mode version of the Nightmare. This forms one of a series of fight guides I'll be releasing on the Nightmare. If you would like more information, click more info on the movie information box on YouTube to learn more. Also be sure to subscribe by clicking the subscribe button to the right to be automatically notified as we release new guides. If you're not familiar with the normal Nightmare encounter, I would suggest watching my 5-man fight guide and practicing the basic mechanics of the fight in a team. In the Phosani's Nightmare encounter, you will find that many of the abilities are similar to the original fight, however there are some additions and a few subtle differences for some of the fight mechanics. With regards to gear, much like the normal encounter, the Nightmare is highly resistant to ranged and magic attacks but weak to melee crush weapons, so players should focus on gear with a high melee strength and high crush attack bonus to maximise their DPS on the Nightmare. In a future video, I will go into detail about gear setups, however when learning the fight you should look to bring a setup somewhat similar to the one shown on screen, but swapping gear as appropriate for your own budget. Two key items worth explaining here in more detail are the Elder Maul and Ham Joint. During the fight, husks and parasites spawn which you have a 100% chance to hit and will always max hit on. By bringing a ham joint, you are essentially able to kill both husks in extremely quick succession, as the attack speed of the ham joint currently has the fastest attack speed in the game. Additionally, with the Elder Maul or also a God Sword, you are able to one-hit the parasite as soon as it spawns, whereas with other weapons you will have to hit more than once, therefore taking additional damage and healing the Nightmare in the parasite's case. What is key to understand is, whilst you will be switching gear constantly throughout the fight, you must know what your max hit is with your own gear setup, as forgetting to offensively pray or wearing the incorrect gear will nullify the reason for bringing such weapons. With this in mind, for the parasite you should be capable of hitting a 55 as a max hit, and for the husks a 20. In the Phosani's Nightmare fight, there are 5 main phases with 4 transition phases. Unlike the normal encounter, the previously phase-unique abilities are no longer tied to a single phase and can be instead used across all of the first 4 phases, whilst the final 5th phase is a DPS burn. There are 3 core attacks and 8 core abilities that the Nightmare will use across each of the first 4 main phases. These are a range attack, which is signified by a jarring motion releasing spikes, a mage attack, which happens when the Nightmare spins around and releases a pink orb, and the third, which is an infrequent rapid charging melee attack in which the Nightmare swipes upward from the ground if you are under or in melee range in front of the Nightmare. Whilst the range and mage attacks are the most common attacks that the Nightmare will use, each of the 3 basic attack styles can be protected against through protection prayers to reduce all of the incoming damage, but failing to correctly protect against the basic attack will incur a significant amount of damage, so it's best to pray correctly. The following 8 abilities can be used across the first 4 phases. The first core ability is Curse. This ability remains unchanged from the normal Nightmare encounter. When the Nightmare uses Curse, the player's screen will momentarily turn pink, then players' overhead prayers will shift one to the right. So for example, clicking Protection from Magic will activate Protection from Missiles, and clicking Protection from Melee will activate Protection from Magic. This will last for 5 of the Nightmare's attacks, after which players' protection prayers will revert back to normal. The second core ability is Parasite. The Nightmare will infect you with a parasite which after a short while will explode out of the player and deal a very high amount of damage unless the player uses a potion such as a Sanfew Serum or Elysium's Balm to significantly reduce the damage it deals. Once the parasite has spawned from the player, they will begin healing the Nightmare for a high amount of health, so players should quickly kill these while simultaneously avoiding standing under the boss in case the Nightmare uses Grasping Claws. Players should note that if you do not drink a dose of Sanfew Serum or Elysium's Balm whilst infected, the ability to max hit the parasite is removed and must be killed as normal. The third core ability is Husks. 2 husks will spawn which attack with moderate magic and range damaging attacks. The larger husk will attack with range only, whilst the smaller husk will attack with mage only. Players should again note that you have a 100% hit chance on husks and parasites, so hit accuracy is irrelevant in this instance. The fourth core ability is Dash. This ability remains unchanged from the normal Nightmare encounter. The Nightmare will jump into the ground and teleport to one of 9 possible locations around the room. After a short while, the Nightmare will speed across the room, and if players are stood anywhere in this path, they will take a high amount of damage. Players should note that after a mushroom infection they must re-enable their run so they have enough time to run out of the dash path. The 5th core ability is Grasping Claws. The Nightmare will reach into the ground and spawn a black portal underneath her and reach up and through a series of smaller portals which spawn randomly around the room. If a player doesn't move from any portal they are standing in, they will take a high amount of damage. In comparison to the normal encounter, there is a significantly higher quantity of portals spawning around you, so you should be prepared to move several spaces away to ensure that you do not take damage. The 6th core ability is a new ability which we'll call Empowered Grasping Claws. The Nightmare will reach into the ground and repeatedly use the Grasping Claws for a total of 5 times. Players should be ready to move around the room repeatedly, although it is also possible to step under the corners of the Nightmare's hitbox to avoid this attack entirely. The 7th core ability is Flower Power. The Nightmare will jump into the ground and spawn at the centre of the room, then split the room into 4 equal-sized quadrants. Only one of these quadrants will be safe, which can be identified by the white Nightmare flowers along 2 lines. The remaining 3 quadrants will be unsafe once the red Nightmare berries bloom and spawn flies which begin to rapidly attack anyone still not in a safe zone, whilst also rapidly healing the Nightmare. In the Phosani Nightmare encounter, the flies deal significantly more damage per hit, so be prepared to eat if you find yourself caught in the open. The 8th and final core ability is Spores. Mushrooms will spawn around the room in one of 2 distinct patterns. If players stand on or are within 1 square of a mushroom, it will explode and infect the player, causing their attacks to become significantly slower in addition to disabling and turning off their run for a while. The infection lasts for approximately 15 seconds and players should note that the attack speed delay is longer than in the normal encounter. There is a unique interaction between Spores, Flower Power and Empowered Grasping Claws in the Phosani Nightmare encounter. After either Spores or Flower Power is used, the Nightmare will immediately use Empowered Grasping Claws, so players should be ready to frequently move and plan their movement paths accordingly. Players should be sure to take a mental note of any mushrooms that have spawned nearby, as exploding a mushroom whilst the Nightmare is using Empowered Grasping Claws is a quick way to get to the graveyard. Again, all of the attacks and abilities just described can be used across the first 4 main phases. At the start of the fight, players should unload their special attacks onto the Nightmare, then save their special attack energy until the final phase. In a similar fashion to the normal encounter, players need to reduce the Nightmare's shield to 0, then attack and charge up the 4 totems which will become active thereafter. Magic damage against the totems is still doubled, so players are better off using their best magic DPS weapon or spell combination. In most cases this will be a powered stave such as the Trident or Sanguinesti staff. Players should know that they again have a 100% hit chance on the totems, so magic attack bonus gear is useless unless it also has a damage modifier such as Ancestral Robes or off pieces like the Occult Necklace and Tormented Bracelet. Additionally, if players opt to use the Arceus spellbook, they should only summon the magic attacking Ghostly Thrall, as its damage is also doubled whilst the other 2 thralls isn't. Once all 4 totems are charged to full, the transition phase starts. In the Phosani Nightmare encounter, the transition phase's difficulty increases as the fight progresses. In the first transition phase, 1 Sleepwalker will spawn which must be killed before it reaches the Nightmare or you will instantly wipe. The first 3 phases are exactly the same, with the only difference being in the transition phases. After each successive main phase and transition phase, an additional Sleepwalker spawns. With this in mind, fast attacking range weapons such as the Hunter's Crossbow and Toxic Blowpipe can quickly kill all of the Sleepwalkers before reaching the Nightmare. In the 4th phase, the Nightmare gains a unique mechanic. As the Nightmare uses a core attack, mage, range or melee, if the player is using a prayer of the same attack style, their protection prayer will be switched off, so players must re-enable their protection prayer to avoid taking any damage. This new mechanic works in combination with the curse ability, so players must be mindful of which protection prayer they are using. This prayer deactivating mechanic will occur throughout the entirety of Phase 4, up to and including charging the totems. Once all of the totems are charged, the final transition phase starts, where you must kill all 4 of the Sleepwalkers to avoid taking any damage. If more than 3 Sleepwalkers reach the Nightmare, it is likely that you will die very early into the final 5th phase. The 5th and final phase is a DPS burn phase. Once the previous phase transition ends, players should quickly eat up as much as possible until the Nightmare becomes active. Once the Nightmare is active, she will continually chain cast Grasping Claws and intermittently spawn Sleepwalkers until the player or Nightmare is dead. Players should start the phase by unloading their special attacks onto the Nightmare and damage her with your main weapon whilst avoiding the Grasping Claws pools and ignoring the Sleepwalkers. In comparison to the normal encounter, the Phosani's Nightmare is a high-octane fight with a myriad of abilities that need to be avoided and dealt with in order to kill the boss, and although there appears to be a lot to learn and deal with at first, players should focus on perfecting their movement paths and keep their health as high as possible. If you would like to know more about this fight, video, or any additional fights, click the Show More button at the bottom of this video for more information and subscribe to see future releases.